This question comes from Little Rock, Independent Line.
I'd like to know why the government doesn't take some kind of responsibility. I don't understand why the people will stop fighting each other, why they obviously have for 5 years seen these convoys coming and going, things like that, and they should stay clear of them. They know how dangerous these situations can erupt. They have been more adversarial, it seems, amongst themselves instead of pulling together as a government. Please don't make fun of Mr. Maliki, but he is in power. It is his country, and they do contracts and things like that. He should be supported somewhat in his decisions. What's the bottom line if Blackwater and other agencies like that are pulled out of the country over there? Can that government pull together and run their own country? And thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting because both General David Petraeus, who's overseeing the surge in Baghdad right now and recently testified, and Ambassador Ryan Crocker have been very clear that they believe that the occupation would not be tenable if it wasn't for these kinds of private forces. But in order to get to the heart of the question that the caller raises, we would have to look at this in an entirely different way and ask a very simple question. Is there going to be peace and stability in Iraq under a U.S. occupation? I've spent a lot of time in Iraq myself, and I tend to think that the major and primary cause of violence right now in Iraq is in fact the U.S. occupation. And when you add to the 170,000 or so U.S. troops, 180,000 private contractors who are totally unaccountable, have not been prosecuted for their crimes, and operate in a climate where immunity and impunity go hand in hand, I think that's just a recipe for escalating violence. And we've seen Blackwater specifically be at the heart of a number of horrifying incidents that have resulted in massive blowback against U.S. troops, massive loss of Iraqi lives. After those 4 men were killed in Fallujah in March of 2004, the Bush administration launched a revenge assault on the city, leveling Fallujah and sparking a massive Iraqi resistance that haunts the occupation to this day. Right now, it's unclear what's going to happen if Blackwater doesn't leave the country. But this situation, we just heard testimony from Ambassador Crocker and General Petraeus a few days before this incident, talking about how things were looking rosy now in Baghdad and getting better, and then this happens. I think we're in for a very bloody several months now as a result of this incident.
Auburn, New York, Republican Line. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I just saw this guy on my favorite show, Amy Goodman. And the guy asked him that was on there what a definition of international terrorism is, and he still calls them, would you call them some kind of radical name? I'm surprised all these people on here have read a few books like Ronald Radash's book, A Journey Through the Old Left, New Left, and the Leftover Left, because that's where this guy's coming from. And David Horowitz, this guy's a left-wing guy. He hates Blackwater. I mean, the guy was a former Navy SEAL. And this goes right along with MoveOn.com's ad about General Petraeus. I'm a World War II guy, and I don't believe these guys were around during World War II. They were saying Roosevelt was a traitor and a warmonger, Pete Seeger, singing songs about Roosevelt. Can you believe it? And he got not only that.
Caller, let me jump in at this point because you've made your point. Thank you. Mr. Scahill?
Well, I think that the antithesis of American democratic values is playing out right now in Iraq. I mean, if the caller believes that he wants Blackwater to speak for him with its unaccountable actions in Iraq, then that's certainly his right. But I don't think this is about being left-wing or right-wing or being a Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. I've had many people who identify themselves as traditional conservatives and scores of veterans from the Iraq War who've come up to me and express their outrage at this system of unaccountable mercenaries in Iraq. And in fact, I've talked to many U.S. troops who've just gotten back from the battlefield in Iraq, and they say that these guys operate like cowboys and they make their lives much more difficult in the war zone. And they ask what message is their country sending them when they're being paid $40,000 a year to be in some hellhole city in Iraq, and then they see the mercenaries whiz by with their six-figure salaries, sometimes with better equipment and better body armor, and we have kids over there who are bolting steel onto their Jeep. So if the caller wants to defend Blackwater mercenaries for their unaccountable actions in Iraq, that's certainly his right, but I think it's very patriotic to be a dissenter, especially in the times in which we live.
Would Blackwater talk to you?
No, in fact, I tried to get interviews with executives of the company, but I did once interview the number 2 man at Blackwater, Kofor Black, who's a 30-year CIA veteran, the man who led the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and one of the key figures involved with the extraordinary rendition, the government-sanctioned torture and kidnap program. I was able to talk to him at a mercenary conference very briefly about Blackwater's operations inside New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and I actually ran into Eric Prince, the owner and founder of Blackwater, and I tried to question him on why he wouldn't provide answers to the families of the 4 men who were killed in Fallujah. Those families are suing Blackwater now for wrongful death, and Mr. Prince wouldn't answer my questions either.
How did you get most of your information?
Well, it was a wide variety of sources. I mean, primarily I filed an enormous volume of Freedom of Information Act requests, tried to get as many of the contracts as I could. I talked to sources who are some of them are members of Congress, some of them are congressional staffers. I talked to former contractors who had worked with Blackwater and other companies. The penalty, though, for a Blackwater contractor talking to a journalist or speaking, revealing any details about the company can be stiff. I believe it can be as high as a $250,000 fine against them, so it's not easy to find people who are willing to talk to you or to say critical things about the company. Also, there have been some tremendous reports that have come out of Blackwater's backyard in Virginia and North Carolina. Bill Sizemore of the Virginian Pilot has done some amazing reporting, as have Jay Price and Joseph Neff of the Raleigh News and Observer. And I think that one of the problems with this system, as I set about to try to paint a picture of this one company, is that even ranking members of the House Intelligence Committee or the committees that are responsible for oversight of U.S. military operations are unable to get detailed information about these companies. And so that's a real problem. And in fact, when my book came out, I had members of Congress calling me, asking me for documents that I refer to or cite in the book. It should be the other way around. It shouldn't be Congress looking to journalists for this. The Congress should be paying attention to this and should have access to these documents.
Next question comes from Pueblo, Colorado. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, and C-SPAN and Jeremy here are doing noble work. You keep it up. I have kind of a two-part thing here. Last week, I saw on my Netscape front page that 2 young Marines over in Iraq that gave a negative report in an interview to a reporter, and I don't have very much information. The very next day the report was released, they were found dead. Does Blackwater ever go after our own people?
Well, I don't know of any instance where Blackwater has gone after U.S. soldiers. There certainly have been tensions between private military contractors and soldiers, and there certainly has been violence that has broken out between contractors and the military. And in fact, the military has identified a very serious problem with some of these private military companies, and that is that they don't coordinate their movements with the U.S. military as effectively as the Pentagon may want them to. And in fact, my understanding from an article by Steve Fainaru that just came out in the Washington Post is that Blackwater hasn't even become a member of the coordinating body for the private military contractors in Iraq, and instead monitors its own movements instead of coordinating it with other private military companies in Iraq. There's a very serious problem when you talk about the tension between the U.S. military and these private contractors.
We have